Hey, happy Thanksgiving. This is Thursday's devotion, and we're in John chapter 7, verse 53 and following. And it says, everyone went to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now, early in the morning, he came again into the temple. I don't know how early, but by the way that it stresses early, it lets us know that it was pretty early. And all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. So there's this, he's in the temple. Jesus is in the temple. People are all around him, and he is teaching them. Well, there's already a problem with the legalists, the scribes, and the Pharisees. So then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him. And that's interesting. The fact that they're bringing this person to Jesus instead of where the proper would have been to the priest or to the high priest or to one of the temple guards. The fact that they bring it to Jesus, it is not in order for the woman to be judged. They want to judge Jesus. So the scribes and the priests brought to him a woman caught in adultery. The Greek almost indicates that she was caught red-handed. By the way, when you're caught red-handed in adultery, you understand that there's two. They don't care about the other person. They grab the one that is the most vulnerable, the woman. And when they had set her in the midst, in other words, I don't think they said, come down here and sit here. I think they kind of threw her forward into the very middle of this crowd that was gathered around Jesus. They said to him, that is Jesus, Teacher. In other words, why don't you teach us something, Master? This woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Isn't it interesting? The question I would have asked, well, where's the other person? But that's not the question that Jesus is asking. In fact, Jesus is pretty silent. Now, Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? Remember, this is not about judging her. It's about judging Jesus. This they said, testing him or judging him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, in other words, they kind of felt ignored, so they kept asking him and asking him. So Jesus raised himself up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Then Jesus spoke to them again. Now them would be the crowd. Most of all the accusers are gone. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. There's so much in the scripture. I've heard many sermons on this. There's often a lot of talk about what he was writing on the ground. I'm a little bit more cautious when I come to what he's writing on the ground. I think it's dangerous to speculate or talk about what he's writing on the ground. You see, I've always been taught not to add to or take away from the Word. So if I start preaching about what he wrote on the ground when the Bible doesn't tell us what he wrote on the ground, and when the Bible clearly teaches us that it's not what they saw, that convicted them. It's what Jesus said. So be honest with you. If God wanted us to know what he was writing on the ground, he would have told us. So I don't think that's the deal. Jesus talks about him being the light in the darkness. Let me ask you, who in this mist are in the darkness the most? Which darkness does Jesus deal with the most? Who are those who confess to see, yet Jesus said are blind? Well, over and over again, is the legalists, the Pharisees, and the scribes. Jesus is making a contrast, not between him and the sin of the woman. For over and over again, he has made it very clear that those who really are blind are the ones who think they can see. And for Jesus, that happens to be the Pharisees. Now, it is true that Jesus does say, I don't condemn you. And he also tells her to go and to sin no more. But you see, the Pharisees and scribes came to judge Jesus, not the woman. Which one does Jesus really end up judging? Not the woman. He even says so. You see, he judged them by a simple word. Are you without sin? Then you've cast a stone. And from the oldest, the maturest, they each drop in their stones. I don't know whether you've ever seen that kind of mob before. I have, unfortunately, on several occasions, but on one in particular. I was doing an interim for a church, and I got a call in the middle of the night. My wife and I were actually already in bed, and I got a call from a man who was, he was out the roof with anger, which is generally doesn't go well with me. He wanted to have a meeting. We had already met. I already had done everything that we could. The man that was the focus of the attention had already confessed and asked for forgiveness, but it wasn't enough. The man that was on the phone, he wanted him stoned. No, not physically stoned, but he wanted him so brought before everybody, humiliated in a very fierce way. I knew this other man very, very well, and to be honest with you, because I was with the convention, I could care less whether I was an interim or not. And so I didn't mind risking. And I said, I tell you what, we'll go ahead and meet. I'll talk to the guy. And I tell you what, you bring your bag of rocks. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, isn't that what you want? You're wanting a stoning? You've already in your heart already judged him, but do you not know that you are judging yourself? You bring your rocks. Well, he insisted on the meeting. And I met with the other man, and I told him, I said, if I was you, I wouldn't come. They don't mean any well, but I'm going to go and I'm going to meet with them. And it was a large group of men from the church that were there, and the anger was out the roof that night. You see, it wasn't enough that this man had wept before them and asked for their forgiveness. They wanted blood. You say, well, what in the world did he do? Well, that was the whole thing. That is funny now. What did he do? I can't even remember what he did. And I guarantee it, they couldn't either. But he broke their law. Heaven forbid for them to realize that they had broken God's law. That they had become the unforgiving servant who had been forgiven much, but they had forgotten their own sins, and I was very much aware of this group of men and what their pasts were, but no, they couldn't see their past. There's a mob thing about stoning. It's rarely about one individual with a stone. Legalists will do that. They rarely find enough power in themselves, so they will educate, mobilize others to join forces with them. And, oh my goodness, pity on the poor soul that they choose to attack. Years ago, I remember such a soul. He was a preacher. And he was basically about ran out of town, not because of his preaching. He was very biblical, very evangelistic, not for an immoral failure. You know what his failure was? Because he dared to preach without socks. Yeah, that's a true story. He dared preach without socks. And the preachers of that area talked about the preacher. They all cast stones. Legalists don't see their own sin. They always carry a backpack of rocks. You need to leave your rocks at home. Love you.